This year commemorates 20 years since CABRI's first conference. What significant strides has CABRI achieved through such gatherings?
Well, it's 20 years since the first conference of CABRI, which was in December 2004. This conference was due to the hard work of senior budget officials in Mozambique, Uganda, and South Africa, who decided that there was a need to focus on the work of budget practitioners and on real reform. The one thing that they did in organizing this conference was to make sure that they had the right people in the room, the heads of budget of countries of Africa, who were really trying to solve their real problems. In addition to having the right audience in the room, they also made sure that they had the right evidence in terms of the case studies that some of the countries presented, and that they discussed topics that were relevant for the day. In the conference itself, what was really the focus was the functionality and how improvements in budget reforms really did make budgeting better for citizens. Very importantly also, were spaces provided to network across the peer collaborative network of African senior budget officials. After that first conference, from the side of CABRI, what we were doing was learning about our network of senior budget officials and learning about how to better ensure an environment within a conference and within our other events that we hold in order to better facilitate the learning and the methodologies. And we use these and have customized these successfully over time. Essentially, all of the conferences that followed had the same ingredients and really were focused on issues that are common to African countries in terms of their PFM challenges and also unique.
Let's take a trip down memory lane. Which CABRI conference meant the most to you and why?
So I was really privileged as a country member representative of CABRI to attend quite a number of conferences. But the one that really stands out for me is CABRI's 9th conference. And it's quite interesting because it's not one that I actually presented at, but rather I benefited more specifically as a participant. This conference was in Nairobi in 2013, and it was focused on the missing links in PFM. Essentially, we had gathered to discuss budget reforms and how they span across budgets, looking at the Open Budget Index survey, which many countries had completed. But there was a specific, unique aspect. CABRI introduced public participation in a bigger way and had included civil societies as part of the attendees. And also, clearly, in terms of our methodologies, showcased some evidence from countries. And I clearly remember the Liberian example. What really struck me in that co-presentation between the Finance Ministry and Civil Society Coalition was how eloquently the person representing from civil society was able to talk about the country budget process in quite a lot of technical detail. This was really interesting to me, being from a country where civil society participation is more legislated within the parliamentary processes and at local government level. So essentially, we ended up having the next session focused within countries on the finance ministries and civil societies having a conversation about what the next steps were and what the commitment could be. This was not the best conversation because what was striking to me was that the person from civil society did not understand any of the technical aspects of budgeting. I'm sure what was striking to her was that the simplest of requests, I was giving 20 reasons as to what steps would be taken before we would get there. The important thing was this was a first conversation. And had this first conversation not happened, we would not have had the budget reforms in terms of our participative budgeting that we later implemented within the country, which ultimately had many projects included, but more specifically and most notable, we worked together on a public portal for citizens to find useful information, and we purposefully, as a team and collaboratively, tried to ensure that this was agile and would change face to the citizens over time in terms of what would really be important to them. Another aspect to the same conference was that there was coaching and presentation around the communication aspect. So we had some workshops around presenting in a mock-up situation to different audiences in the budget, whether that is ministerial, presidential, or whether that was relating to citizens or to other stakeholders in government. And those inputs were then being critiqued by media experts as well as the other countries. And what that taught everyone in the room was that what you think you're conveying might not be how the message is received, and that in budget reform, the most important thing is normally not about balancing the books and the technical, but more importantly about having the conversation with citizens and all the other stakeholders and people involved to reach a common understanding of the impact of the budget.
For the upcoming Public Finance Conference, which session do you look most forward to, and why?
Goodness me, this is a very, very difficult question to answer. The reason being that this conference, as with all our others, has all the key elements that I had described or alluded to earlier, i.e. we're going to have the right people in the audience and plenty of people in the audience, over 100 in-person participants and many, many more virtually. So we are going to then discuss digital PFM, looking at the relevant topics of the day. Also, as is traditional, we will have the expertise in the room and have done some of the technical work to discuss this topic and to take it further. Definitely and squarely focused on the functionality for public finance management systems and how that can be improved. Certainly in terms of the conference, a lot of space for networking, and certainly the lessons from that and the ideas and the co-creation in terms of looking at important aspects and how they impact will resonate across the various countries on our continent, and certainly also in terms of internationally, as we also have international experts present and members of international organizations. In terms of picking the actual slot, I am conflicted between two. The one is the Digital Public Finance Bazaar, which is going to be really exciting, and there's a menu to choose from. We won't be able to choose them all, but we'll be able to choose which ones interest us. In that bazaar, there's going to be a demonstration by different countries and different stakeholders within countries, whether that's civil society, government, other institutions, around aspects of digital that they've sought to innovate in and in order to implement improvements. It's really going to be interesting to see what they highlight as challenges and what some of the real good surprises were in terms of outcomes. But the session I think that I'm actually landing on is session 5, which is Digital Public Infrastructure, What For? An African Perspective. So we do know that digital public infrastructure relates to the governance regime and principles that guide digital infrastructure, to the regulations and so on, and standards for interoperability between different IT systems, and to ensure that whatever is developed can be used in the public sector, in the private sector, and beyond for the economy. But really importantly, in terms of the functions that have been sought to be enhanced, We will then have some Africa examples, and we will then be able to see, in terms of our African perspective, where have we been the leader and what are some of the key learnings that we can take away from each other in order to strengthen and accelerate the digital transformation for economies in a way that is sustainable over time and not a dead loss investment, and in a way that is inclusive and benefits citizens and other users of information and the digital systems to improve their service delivery.